Okay, Masechet Eruvin, Daf Ayin Bet. We are starting with the new Mishnah. Both this Mishnah and the next Mishnah are discussing Eruv Chaserot, where some of the people in it are already related to each other in some way. So that's what we'll see here. Chamisha chaburot sheshabtu bitraklin ehad. You have this word traklin is a Greek word. It means try. It comes from two words: try meaning three, and recline. So it's generally like a ballroom or a large room where three people would recline, but it might be bigger than that. And what you have here is a number of groups, chamisha chaburot. So they're groups of people that stick together, and they're guests in this big yard, in this big room, and they split it into sections. This is one way of looking at it. A better picture is something like this, where you have this room, and there are five dividers, and each one has its own opening, and it opens up into a courtyard. And there are other people that also live in that courtyard. So we're trying to figure out what is the status of this. So obviously, since it's shared by multiple people, they have to make an eruv, this guy and this guy. And the question is, is this all considered one residence because it's all one house and they're all living in there, or because they are separate groups and there is some kind of division between them? And that's what we're going to discuss today. Does it matter what kind of division? Is if it's separate rooms altogether, like a hotel or apartments, or what if it's just dividers like a hospital divider or like an office cubicle? So what kind of dividers would make it separate, and what would it be together? If they are separate units, then each and every group has to contribute a piece of bread to the eruv. If not, if they're all together, then they all together have to contribute one piece of bread to the eruv that they would designate and put in one of the houses or in this house. That is the question. So this is subject to a machloket. Bet Shammai is machmir as usual. Omerim eruv lechol chabura v'chabura. Each and every group has to contribute their own food to the eruv. They're considered separate groups. Bet Hillel omerim eruv ehad lechulan. Bet Hillel says they're all in the same house. They're all considered one group, and therefore only one of them has to contribute, and that's good for everyone. All right. Now we qualify umodim bizman shemiksatan shirim b'chadarim o ba'aliyot shehen tzrichin eruv lechol chabura v'chabura. There's an important limitation that they all agree that if they are in separate rooms or separate floors, then every group has to give their own. Okay, so it's clear if separate rooms, everyone agrees that they're separated after their own. The question is if it's some kind of not quite a separate room, but a divider of some height. And what we're going to see is, I'll just give you a quick preview. Yeah, that's what we're going to see. Is that we're going to deal with three levels. What if the first level is if the walls go all the way up to the ceiling? They're kind of like maybe a curtain in a hospital room, right? So it's not quite a sturdy wall, but some kind of a temporary wall that does go up to the ceiling. And then we'll have what about a wall that goes up 10 tefachim but is cut short, so it's only half a wall? What is that? What would they say about that? And the last one is misifas, which is just a very flimsy low divider. And so, would that count or not? And so that's the three levels we're going to deal with. I'm going to see four different interpretations of the Mishnah with all different permutations of what's allowed and what's not allowed. The red means everyone agrees it's prohibited. In other words, everyone has to give they were considered separate groups, and everyone has to give. Yellow means it's a machloket. Bet Shammai is more stringent than Bet Hillel. And the green means everyone agrees they can all join together as one, and all you need is one person to contribute the eruv for everyone. All right, that's the key. I didn't make that chart, but I did add the colors. Good. So Amar Rav Nachman, machloket bimsifas. What they're arguing about is the flimsy divider. That's what they're discussing. And in that case, Bet Hillel would say Flimsy divider is okay. Bet Shammai say even a flimsy divider separates them, and they each have to give 5. So that's very machmir. But if it's a wall at all, even a short wall, right, as long as it's 10 tefachim high, then everyone agrees that is a real, that is considered a separation, and everyone has to give. So you see that this opinion is very stringent. Wrong way. That's the first opinion here that is very stringent. And the only possibility where they can all join together is if it's a very flimsy wall, according to Bet Hillel. That's it. So that's going to be the most stringent opinion. Now, that was Rav Nachman said that, but there's another version of what Rav Nachman said. Ika da'amra amar Rav Nachman af. He adds the word af, bim sifas machloket. That they argue in both cases, which means both in Mesifas, and if he says also this, that means they agree, they also disagree in this case. So this one is a little bit more lenient and would say that if it's a half a wall, or if it's a flimsy wall, then Bet Hillel would say they can join together. Bet Shammai would say each has to give their own. But they all agree if it's a full wall up to the top, although a temporary wall, right? We said already there's another level above this, that if it's separate rooms altogether, like a real actual apartment, then everyone agrees that it's separate, and they have to all give separate. But this is a temporary but full wall. So this one is a little bit more lenient than the first version of Rav Nachman. These both are two versions of Rav Nachman. Okay, good. So now Peligi Ba, now we have yet two more opinions from Eretz Yisrael this time. Peligi Ba Rabbi Chiya v'Rabbi Shimon b'Rabbi. We don't know who said which. Hadamar machloket b'mechisot ha'magiot latikra. They actually argue on the tall wall that goes up to the ceiling. Ava mechisot she'en magiot latikra dibra kol eruv echad lechulan. But if they do not, then they all agree that they can join together as one room, as one group. So this is the most lenient opinion. Says this is the machloket, that full walls, and everyone would be permissive that they can just give one for everyone, both in a short wall and in a flimsy wall. Okay, so that's the most permissive. That's Amora A, whichever one it is. We don't know which Amora is which. And the last opinion, as we can just see in the chart already, matches up with the second one of Rav Nachman, right? Red and then yellow, although this one doesn't say anything about the flimsy wall, just not sure if it would agree or if the flimsy wall would be green, right? That could be, I mean, it's certainly less than the short wall. Okay, so if you want to put them in order, this is the most stringent, this is the most lenient, and these two are in the middle. Good. So let's see. They're arguing about short wall. If it's a tall wall, all right, now we have all the opinions. So once we set out all the four opinions, we're going to quote a baraita. And this baraita is going to be authoritative. We're going to follow this halacha, and we're going to use it as a proof in this proof to sort out those cases. Let's see what the baraita says. Amar Rabbi Yehuda has-sabar. Sabar means the thinker. This is the Talmudic version of Rodin, right? He was known for his keen insight, so he was called Rabbi Yehuda the thinker. Sabar. לא נחלקו בית שמאי ובית הלל המחיצות המגיעות לתקרה שצריכין עירוב לכל חבורה וחבורה. If it's a full wall that goes up, then they are separate rooms and everybody has to give something separate. So there's no machloket about that. Mishnah wasn't talking about that case. אמה נחלקו על מחיצות שאין מגיעות לתקרה שבית שמאי אומרים עירוב לכל חבורה וחבורה ובית הלל אומרים עירוב אחד לכולן. They're talking about short walls. And it's that in that case that Bet Shammai considers them separations, and Bet Hillel considers them all not separations, and they can all join together. So in other words, that would be red on top and yellow in the second. This baraita does not discuss the flimsy wall. So if we go back, we can already see ourselves, right? Red and then yellow. So this fits certainly this second Amorah here. It fits this exactly because both the second Amorah and the Braita that we just quoted by Yehuda Sabar do not address the flimsy wall. And it can also fit this one, although we're not sure, right, if it fits the bottom. That's what we'll see. And certainly this one is too stringent and this Amorah is too lenient, right? So this is a Braita, so it's more authoritative. So this is a challenge to the Rav Nachman's first version and to the first Amora, too stringent, too lenient, but it does fit with this one, and it may also fit with this one, assuming that the bottom here is the same as this, although it only addresses this. Okay, so now that we saw that, we can see inside. Lemanda amar b'mchisot magiot atikra machloket tiyuvta. Just have to tell you, this took me like so long today to figure this out. So I'm giving it on a silver platter with this nice chart. I wish I had this chart at the beginning when I started the sugya. Okay, lemanda amar b'mchisot magiot atikra machloket tiyuvta. So right, according to the one that says that when they go up to there's machloket, even when they're tall walls, right? That's that's very lenient interpretation. Then that tiyubta, this is a refutation of that. But the other one, this one here is a support, right? It's a challenge to this one, and it's a support for this one. Very good. And how about Rav Nachman? Lahachlishnada Rav Nachman machloket bim sifas tiyubta. According to the first version of Rav Nachman, this would be a problem because Rav Nachman is too stringent. But according to this one, should we also say here that the Baraita is a challenge to this one? Why? Since the Baraita only addressed this case and says short walls is a machloket, so that would imply that flimsy walls would not be a machloket. That flimsy walls, everyone would be fine with it. Even Bet Shammai, right, would say it's not a wall and you can just give one. Right, that is the implication. If it doesn't address it, then we should assume that it's okay. Right, and then in that case, it would be different from what Rav Nachman says, because this says it's a machloket. So that's what we tried to say at first. So should we say tiyufta? No, Rav Nachman could answer. Amar lach Rav Nachman peligi b'mchisa v'uadin b'msifas. No, in fact, they disagree with both the short wall and the flimsy wall. And the reason why the Baraita only mentioned the case of a short wall is to show you how far Bet Hillel goes, that they are even lenient in a short wall to say it's not considered a wall, you're all there together. And so we wanted to really show that. That's why I chose that case, although in fact, in the flimsy case, also everyone would agree that it's fine. So wait, why not? Why doesn't the Baraita mention the flimsy wall and say over there that Bet Shammai thinks it's okay and doesn't consider it? No, sorry, that's machloket. Why not mention they mention the flimsy wall and say there that Bet Shammai is stringent to show you how far they go, that even a flimsy wall is considered a partition, and they have to give 5 separate ones. Right? The answer is koach dehetera adif is a very famous phrase, very important phrase that says that the power of being lenient is greater. In other words, it's very easy to to be stringent, right? You can just say, "Oh, not allowed, not allowed." But when someone has a good reason to be lenient, then that really shows their knowledge that they can do that. So if we want to show who's the greater strength of Bet Shammai, how stringent he is, or Bet Hillel, how permissive he is, it's more important to emphasize the permissive stance of Bet Hillel. Okay, good. So now that we've cleared that up and cleared the Braita follows that middle opinion. In fact, that we follow that Baraita. Okay. Now we're going to just check it with a couple of other cases. Amar Rav Nachman v'Yitzchak matnitin namid daikai. This is in fact the language of the Mishnah. It also is supportive of the Baraita and of that middle opinion. The katani umodim bizman shemiksatan shiruyim b'chadarim aliyot shesrichin eruv lechol chabura b'chabura. Because the ending of the Mishnah, if you remember the Sefa, says that everyone agrees when they are in separate rooms or separate floors that they are separated. Now, why do you need to tell me that? I mean, if it's really separate apartments altogether, pishita, of course they're separate, but no one would ever think that they could join together as one group when they are in separate rooms altogether. So why do I have to say that? Rather, it means when they are in some kind of structure that is similar to a separate room. What would that be? It's when they're in some kind of large dining room, but there are temporary walls. That's going up to the ceiling. That is when they all agree, and that is in fact that middle opinion says, right? They all agree when they are, even if not permanent walls, temporary walls up to the ceiling. They all agree. And the machloket is only in the short walls, and perhaps also in the flimsy walls. Okay. So what does it mean? Something that's like a room, when they go up to the ceiling. All right, very good. So now all that was one interpretation of the Mishnah. Now we're going to have a second interpretation of the Mishnah. All right, here's how it goes. Tana. What is this Baraita says, talking about the Mishnah, and says, what is the Mishnah, what kind of cases are talking about? אבל אם היה עירובן בא אצלן, דברי הכל עירוב אחד לכולן. What he's saying is that the machloket between Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai is where is about the question of where the eruv is placed. When they put their, let me get back to the picture. As follows. Assuming they all have to contribute. Well, let's see. When they place, when you make an eruv, you have to choose where to put it. You put it in one person's house. It doesn't really matter where you put it. Now, if it's placed in someone else's house, like here, then each and every group has to contribute their own, right, and put it there. However, if they all contributed into this place, right, then that's where there's a machloket. And Bet Shammai says each one of these has to contribute to wherever, let's say they put it in this one, the leftmost one. They all have to contribute and put it into the left one. So according to Bet Shammai, it doesn't make a difference whether they put it here or there. Everyone has to contribute. According to Bet Hillel, however, then it makes a difference. If they put it in one of these houses, you need all five to contribute a piece of bread. If they put it inside one of their houses, then that's enough to consider all this as one. And so then these four do not have to contribute, only one has to, and these two people also will contribute into that person's house. So if we, let's see if we could try to fit this back into the language of the Mishnah, basically as follows. 5 groups that are in one room. Bet Shammai says everyone has to everyone has to contribute, no matter where they are. Bet Hillel says only one if they are staying in the same room, right? So that's what it's talking about. And it's not the question is not about the size of the walls. Size of the walls also does make a difference, because you see here that if they're completely separate, right? So the size of the wall still has some relation, but this is adding another factor altogether. Okay. Now, with that in mind, let's just check a baraita. Keman nazla hadetanya, chamisha shegabu et eruban, כשמוליכין את עירובן למקום אחר, עירוב אחד לכולן. We have a baraita that just gives one opinion and says that 5 people that all collected their eruv, when they put it in a separate area outside of where those 5 are, then they all have to contribute. Well, if they all have to contribute, keman kebet Hillel, so that fits Bet Hillel just fine. Okay, now that's one possibility. There's another possibility of that, a very similar, just a take on that same machloket. The machloket is actually when the eruv comes to them. Actually, I think I explained this one first, so now I have to switch what I just said. Okay, let me just go back. When they put it in a separate room, in a different house, then that's where there's a machloket. But if they came to them, everyone agrees you could just do one, right? So this is a more lenient interpretation that if it's in their common house, then they don't have to share. Then they don't have to each contribute. They could only one of them. And so then this story works for that. In this story, they only had one for everyone, and they put it in a separate house. So that could only be Bet Hillel. Only Bet Hillel would say that. Okay, this interpretation is more stringent now. According to this interpretation, when the Eruv is in their common house, then that's a machloket. But if it was in a separate house, everyone agrees that you need all five to contribute. And now, according to that, we have the same baraita. We're going to quote it again and test it. And in this case, they put it in a separate house, yet they had only one. So who could that be? That's like nobody, right? Because in this interpretation, the machloket was when they kept it in their house. Outside their common house, then all five have to agree, both according to Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. So this baraita does not work according to this interpretation. Okay, that's all for that Mishnah. And now we have a very interesting case about family that lives in a chush, right? Hosh, how do you say it? Hosh together.
I just asked you about the bread. So, but how come? I mean, what's the halacha? Because our community is it's just one. You're doing it on our behalf.
Yeah, so this is we're doing it on behalf. That means everybody actually is contributing.
So that we are okay.
Yeah, because we have you in mind. It says a little bit of this matzah is for you, a little bit of matzah is for that person, right? So we're actually doing it for everyone. Okay. But this is a case where they didn't do it they didn't do it on behalf of, so they have to do it. Okay, this halakha is actually quite relevant to apartment buildings and hotels because there you have people living in different rooms. But could be a common courtyard or hallways and stairways and lobby. And so what do you do with all that, right? If you want to carry in there, then would you have to make an eruv, right? So according to this, there's a definite possibility that you would.
But in an apartment building in Manhattan, you don't have to because there's an eruv in Manhattan.
Oh, okay, that's a good point. So if there's already an eruv around the whole area, then okay, all the apartments are included in eruv, just as all houses are included. So then you wouldn't have to worry.
Yeah, but what about on a Pesach vacation? When you're all in the hotel.
Great. Yeah, when you're on Pesach vacation, what about? So then you're in a hotel. Yeah. So in that case, we say that the hotel is actually owned by one person, and they, even though you're using it, they have all the furniture, utensils, things in there belong to the hotel, and they can come in and out anytime. So you don't really quite own it, the apartment. And the same thing, according to Moshe Feinstein, would apply in an apartment building that's a rental, because a rental is often the owner owns the appliances and things like that. I think it will be more complicated if it comes to a condo where you own. Well, even that there's a difference between a condo and a
co-op.
Yeah, co-op, right? So that could get complicated.
Airbnb in a big building.
Right. So who owns the common area, and
does the Talmud never deal with tenants, like renters and tenants?
It may, but
are all these cases when we deal with like hatzerot, and we're assuming that the person living there is the owner?
No, it doesn't matter. For separate houses, it doesn't matter. If you're just living there, it doesn't matter if you're the renter or you own it. But I'm asking, in an apartment building, if one person actually owns the whole thing, then you wouldn't need to do it, right?
Why? That would be like the case.
A city. Remember a city that's owned by one person? That might be similar. Although there you did need to make an eruv. All right, it gets complicated. I can't deal with that. I'm not prepared to deal with all that right now. But this is anyway very relevant to all that discussion. Okay, ha'achin shayu ochlin al shulchan avihem vishenim bebatehem sirichin eruv lechol echad ve'echad lefichach im shachach echad mehem ve'lo erev mevatel et reshuto. Okay, so you have brothers and they eat with their father, but they sleep in their own homes. So imagine they live in a courtyard, they share a courtyard, they have their own houses, but they all come to eat with their father. on a regular basis. So in that case, they each need an eruv for each and every one needs an eruv. We're assuming that there are other people that are also in that courtyard together with them, and therefore, if one of them forgot, then they're stuck. He will make everyone else prohibited, and then on Shabbat he has to relinquish his right to the property, to the courtyard, and by relinquishing the right to the courtyard, he won't be able to carry out of his house, but that will permit everybody else to carry out of their homes. All right. Now, so according to this, in other words, what the main thing is where you sleep, right? Not where you eat. Okay, that's what's going to come up in the Gemara. That's the major question we're going to see today. What defines where you are? Is it where you sleep or where you eat? Okay, now all this ematai is in a limited case. בזמן שמוליכים עירובן במקום אחר. אבל אם היה עירוב באצלן, או שאין עמהן דיורים בחסר, אינן צריכים לערב. Let's do the last case first. If there's nobody else in the chassid, if it's only family, if it's just a father and the sons, right, and their wives, obviously, right, the father and the sons, then and they all eat with the father. So look, you don't need an eruv in that case. They're actually, what's the point of an eruv? It's a symbolic shared meal, but in this case, they actually share a meal all the time, so they don't need to make any eruv in that case. Also, they would not need to make an eruv if there were other people that lived there, but the other people brought their bread to the father's house or to one of their houses. Then so the family is all connected as one, and the outsiders bring it to them, and then they can plug in, and they're all fine. But the Resha is talking about a case where there are other non-family members in the courtyard, and they deposit the eruv in one of the non-family members. In that case, the family unit is not sufficient to transfer over, right? Just because I'm with my father and my father gives some bread, or my brother gives some bread, that's not enough, because each and every one has to give bread to the outsider. It's only enough for us to be a clan within ourselves. Okay, so that makes sense. And now we'll analyze Shema Mina Mekom Nina Gorem. According to the beginning here, since although they all eat in the same place, we say that since they sleep in different places, so sleeping in different places requires them to each contribute when there are outsiders there. So you see, that shows that it's the place of sleeping that's the main thing. We're going to see a machlok in a second about this. And Rav says, no, it's place of eating. So Amarav Yudah Amarav, he can answer and say, "B'mekabel perashanu." We're not talking about when they actually eat in the father's house. Not that they come over every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but rather that the father gives them money, gives them an allowance for food, but they actually eat in their own homes. If in fact they really did physically eat at their father's house, then that would be their place, and then they're all actually considered one unit, and they would not have to. So that's what Rav is understanding the word, that they eat at their father's table, not literally, but rather simply that the father provides money for them. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan, מי שיש לו בית שער אכסדרה מרפסת בחסר חברו, הרי זה אין אוסר עליו. If someone has sleeps in a gatehouse, a porch, a balcony of his friend, and the friend made an eruv, that person who's sleeping on the balcony, it does not need to contribute to that eruv. He doesn't prohibit anybody else, because it's not considered a residence. He's sleeping on the porch, right? That's not a home, and so that person is not considered significant. Bet hateven, bet habakar, bet ha'isimu, bet ha'osarot, הרי זה אוסר עליו. But if there's a friend that's sleeping in the straw storeroom, the cattle shed, the wood shed, or a storehouse, then even though those are not usual places to sleep, but they are self-contained, they have a wall, they're a room, and so if a person does sleep there, that is considered a residence, and that person then has to contribute to the eruv. It's like he has a separate home. That is all Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer eno oser ela mekom dira bilvad. He says, no, only a actual place of residence, another place that's fit for residence only, and so not a storehouse. No, don't consider that to be a home. And he's going to bring a proof. אמר רבי יהודה, המעשה בבן נפחה שהיו לו 5 חסרות באושה. ובא מעשה לפני חכמים ואמרו, אינו אוסר אלא בית דירה בלבד. This certain person had 5 courtyards, had houses in 5 courtyards, but he only lived in one. And so the case came before the sages, and they said only the bet dira, only the one that is an actual residence. We just clarify that bet dira sakal da'atech. What does that mean? That he actually has to reside in it? Ela ema mekom dira. It means a place that is fit for residence. And only that place. So therefore, you see, these storehouses are not fit for residence, so we don't count them. Okay, good. Now, once we mentioned this makom dira, what does that mean? A place, what does it mean that your place of residence? And here's a machloket I referred to before. My makom dira, Rav amar mekom pita, Shmuel amar mekom lina. So Rav says it's wherever your pita bread is, right? That's your meal is your place. And Shmuel says no, it's where you sleep. Okay, good. Now we're going to have a question on Rav's opinion. That's a place of the meal. Haroim v'akayasim b'burganin shomre perot b'zman shedarkanalin ba'ir harehen kan sheha'ir b'zman shedarkanalin b'sadeh yesh mapayim lechol ruach. We're asking from a braita that has to do with eruv techumin, not eruv chatzerot. There's eruv right, so to carry more. So it's a different category, but the Gemara is comparing them. That conceptually it's a symbolic meal that is my place. And so in this case, you have these different people, these the shepherd, the watchman, when they generally sleep in the city, then they are like the people in the city, right? Even though they're spending all day out in the watching out there in the field, so their center of gravity is in the city. When they sleep in the field and they're watching all over the time over there, then that's their place, and they have 2,000 amot from where they sleep. What do you see from here? That a person's place is where he sleeps, not where he eats. So what's Rav going to do with that? Hatam anan saded imam tu lehu rifta hatam tefeni chalehu. So you can answer that we know that if you would bring them the bread wherever they're sleeping, then they would be happy, right? The only reason why they might go somewhere else to eat is because they don't have the food with them. They got to go back to the city. But really, it's the place that even though they're not actually eating there, it's the place that they would want to eat. That's significant. And so so he's able to interpret this baraita to conform to his opinion. That's where they eat. All right. Now back to Rav. Rav Yosef, lo shemi'a li hashemata. Rav Yosef says this fact, he was a student of Rav. He says, I never heard Rav say this, that the place of where you eat is your place. Remember, Rav Yosef, when he got old, he was forgetful. And so his student Abaye would remind him. We saw a few cases like this. Abaye, you taught this to us. And it's about, on this case, the following case. It's right on Mishnah. You have 2 brothers that eat with their father, even though they sleep in separate homes. Everybody needs to make their own eruv. And we asked you, Rav Yosef, doesn't this prove that it's a place of sleeping? And you told us, when it says that they ate with their father, it means that their father gave them a salary, like we said before. But not, and that's why they each have to contribute, because they're eating and sleeping and their own homes. But you're right, if they were actually eating in their father's home, then it's the place of eating that is the determining factor, and in such a case they would not have to contribute to the eruv, even if there were other people that were living in the same courtyard. And that concludes that topic, and we'll see more permutations of different living arrangements tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen ve'amen.